Hi there, this is Jeff at North Tahoe High School. Thank you for joining us today in this sunny June afternoon. And I want to start us out by giving you an overview of what we're going to be doing today. We're trying this method of sharing a presentation with you so that we can save a little bit of time, make it a little bit more functional for me to be able to present you to the number of informational evenings and night events. So we're kind of doing this a little bit as a beta test, trying this kind of digital webinar format. And so what I would like us to do is I'm going to walk us through a presentation and kind of highlight a few things, just as I would at a normal kind of parent information night where students or parents can attend. On this YouTube page, you can also chat. So I have a chat box open that you can chat questions if you're watching live. If you are watching this recording, that's the nice thing is it automatically does record this video for you. You can leave comments or just shoot an email to me, set up an appointment. I'm happy to go over anything that we covered today. Do know that we will spend some time in the fall covering a lot of this information. Again, this information is stuff that will take some practice. It probably will take you 1 or 2 times to hear the information to kind of grasp it a little bit better. And it is super important for both you and you being the student and parents to understand the process of how the college application works. I do want to do this before we leave for summer, prior to kind of releasing students into that world of work or fun or travel, so that you have an idea of how you can also use your summer effectively. One thing that I want to highlight is we will be having, we are planning on having a program called the Reach Higher Academy that will start, this will be our first year attempting it and we'll see what happens. But it's scheduled for August 24th, which is about a week before we start school. And registration is open and it's designed strictly for the rising junior class. In this case, the class of 2019 as of this recording. The registration is available on our website as well as in their students' Google Classroom account. Registration is required, and I'm asking that students commit to coming to this program. It'll be at school. It's going to be at least a half-day program, and I am asking that students commit. We are probably won't run unless we can get about 10 students at least to commit to coming that Friday. But we're going to actually be giving students time and working with them on a lot of what we talk about today and actually getting some stuff done before we actually jump into the school year. So keep an eye out for that. Let me hop over here. I'm going to change screens real quick. I'm going to show you the presentation that we're going to be walking ourselves through. So in just a second, you should see that pop up on the screen. All right, so you should see the presentation pop up shortly if you haven't already yet. And so what we're going to be doing today is kind of, I have a long presentation and I won't highlight everything. I'm going to try to keep this relatively short, hopefully less than about 45 minutes. And the beautiful thing about this format too is you can actually skip around if you need to. So what we were going to be covering this afternoon is give you a broad overview as we jump into the college world. And we will talk about 2-year colleges in addition to 4-year colleges, but a lot of the work and energy and effort actually falls within the 4-year college kind of competitive admissions environment. We're going to kind of look at the process of how that works, highlight some of the details and anticipating loose ends. So how do we kind of head off problems before they even happen? Talk about not freaking out in the process. What equation do each of us, or what part of the equation do each of us hold? Parents, students, myself, teachers, school, that, etc. And also answer a few common questions. And then if anybody participates and would like to ask any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at the end. So one thing that you guys need to know as rising seniors is you're about, if you haven't already, you're about to jump into an informational avalanche. And what that means is you are going to be getting a ton of information in the form of emails, in the form of presentations, phone calls, requirements of students, requirements of parents. So senior year really is super busy. And so just be prepared. know how you manage your time, and that knowing that, how you've managed your time in the past may need further adjustment. And sometimes that means prioritizing. You might need to cut out some things that you're used to doing. You might not be able to work as much or participate in every sport that you were thinking about participating in, depending on what other plans you have for your senior year. So do just keep in mind that, even if you are a well-planned person, it will get kind of crazy in your senior year, especially in the fall timeframe. Please always read what you receive in an email. I communicate often by email because I don't have regular easy access to everyone, and it's somewhat interruptive to pull students out of class as frequently as sometimes I need to get information out, and it's just not very practical if I need to get it out to 100 students. So I do send a lot of emails, and I think you guys hopefully are used to that by now. We also communicate via phone calls, so robocalls or robo emails to parents and students. Google Classroom is also a frequent place where information is posted. So please do pay attention to that. Lack of reading does not mean that you have no responsibility for what you're supposed to be reading. So please do make it a habit to read it several times a week at minimum, because it also goes with the college application process. That's the primary way that colleges will actually interact with you as well, is through your email and through your school portal that you will end up opening once you have completed a college application. Understanding where you find information. So on the North Tahoe High School website, and this is particular school counseling, I'm selfish, and so I'm only showing you my stuff. There's a lot of information on the school counseling website, or the NTHS website. So I highly encourage you to keep looking around, and it's updated relatively frequently. But within the school counseling world, there's a lot of information that you need to be aware of, and you have access to a ton of resources. I spent a good amount of time trying to provide digital resources that you can use at your leisure, versus needing to come in and trying to find an appointment time and kind of go through things. So I try to make things as accessible as possible. So the school counseling website had moved last year. So just again, if you don't know where it's at, it's under the programs menu and the school counseling link. And it looks something like this. It might change slightly, but we do keep this page updated. And so there are a number of menu items along the top of the page that I would encourage you to click around. Going into senior year, often one of the more frequent sections is going to be the college and career counseling section and the counseling resources. There's a number of different things, from the college handbooks that we've had uploaded, information on college testing, what a college app process might look like, links to scholarships, links to other pages that I might show you a little bit later today about how to track applications, how to create that college list, are all readily available there. You can also see there's a link to request your appointments. My first big tip for students and for parents, but primarily for students, is ask for help. You have never done this before. Your parents may have done this once or twice, or maybe even 3 times if you're lucky, but many of your parents have probably never done this before either. Asking for help is not a weakness. Asking for help is a strength. It's something that you have to learn how to do. You have to become a strong self-advocate. If you haven't been able to practice that, or if you're a shy person, that's something that you really need to challenge yourself with in your senior year. There's a saying of, there are no dumb questions. The only dumb question is one that's not asked. And that's absolutely true in this process. I do this every year with hundreds of students, and I have questions every year that I have to go ask or search or remind myself about to be able to kind of understand what that process looks like. So please do ask for help. But also on that flip side, please do a little bit of general research. Okay, so we are busy here at school. I have over 300 students on my caseload. And, I do appreciate when students can take a little bit of time and actually Google something to look for some basic information on the website. So please don't be helpless. And I might ask you that. I said, hey, did you take a minute to research that? And if you say yes, and then I'm happy to answer that question, but I might turn it back on you and say, hey, here's some great places to find that information. So please take a few minutes and actually do that. But I'm happy to answer questions, and especially in this process that's very complicated. So we kind of do things in a somewhat odd order in America regarding college applications. We kind of plan over the last 3 or 4 years or longer if you're an early planner, or the last couple of weeks if you're a late planner, to figure out where we'd like to apply. You are not too late if you haven't started that process. We'll cover a little bit of that a little later in the presentation, but you should have some ideas of what maybe you at least want. What is important for you for a college application? And so that will happen. That will go through roughly August, September. Once we hit about October, applications tend to open. Okay, and so you're not going to see many applications open prior to October, and October 15th tends to be kind of the early deadlines or early openings. So at least for submitting. So know that you're not necessarily be submitting applications in July. You might be able to fill them out, but you won't be submitting them. But we kind of pick where we want to apply. We submit an application, and we won't actually know how much things are going to cost us until much later in that process, actually, if we've determined that we've been admitted to that school. So you do have to be a little strategic in how you're building that school list. October 1st is an important date in the world of financial aid, how you're going to pay for school. October 1st is the first date that the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, opens up. And so that's something that you're going to want to submit ASAP is the suggestion, because if you think about it, if you think about a pool of money, so if you have a swimming pool and that's all the financial aid that's available to students, potentially at a school or across the nation, and some of those pools of money are finite. Okay, so they kind of have a limit to them, and schools might divvy those out as financial aid kind of award letters and decisions about admissions come in. So there is some benefit to submitting things early, but there are different deadlines. So March 2nd in California is the priority deadline, is what they call it, to be considered for the most amount of aid, as well as like the Cal Grant and things like that. Other states have different procedures. So if you're applying out of state, it's important, and it's your responsibility to know different deadlines. Some deadlines are hard. Some deadlines simply say submit as soon as possible. But that would be primarily for merit-based aid. You're probably not going, I would say almost all students in California, if you're attending our school, will likely not qualify for state-based aid, which many of these deadlines sometimes coincide with. In other states, typically you have to be an in-state resident to qualify for in-state tuition and in-state aid. December through June, we complete typical scholarship applications and then kind of follow up with to-do list items, sending in transcripts, documentations, and things like that. And then by May 1st, most students make a decision based on their acceptances and place a deposit, probably for both housing and their basically tuition deposit. And then they finish up the school year. So that's kind of the year at a glance. And we'll walk through a little bit of these pieces. But before that, I want to, the big piece that the summer is really useful for is primarily three things. Number one is kind of defining that college list. What is important to me? Whether that's a 2-year college, trade school, 4-year college, whatever your goal is. And you might have multiple levels, which is highly encouraged. I would encourage every student to have a 2-year college that they would go to if that's what ended up being the best fit for that student. But having multiple levels of opportunities is never a bad thing. But defining fit is really the approach that schools and college admissions folks recommend. We tend to start with the idea of we've heard of this 3% of schools out there that are kind of in the public eye, and 9 times out of 10 it's because of their sports teams or because they're part of the Ivy League. Okay, not necessarily because they're a great academic fit, not necessarily because they're the best programs per se, but because they are the most publicly recognizable. And so there are thousands of schools out there, and there are likely many more that are probably even better fits than some of those schools. So defining fit really looks at, admissions wise. So do we have a good breakdown of schools regarding, who has, am I admitted? Am I admissible? How much does it cost? So financially, what are the pros and cons about campus life? Does it have sporting teams or opportunities for me apart from just my academics? Which 9 times out of 10, I would say, I'm saying that a lot. I'm making up statistics here, but often when students go to college after high school and find that it's not a good fit for them, it's often the case that it's not necessarily the academics. Academics can certainly play into it. You know, if they are struggling, that's usually an issue with kind of, are they prepared for the rigors of that, which usually coincides with how hard that, not how hard they work, but how did they practice college-ready skills in high school? And it's usually having to do with studying, but more along the lines of, I just didn't fit in. I didn't find my group of people. I didn't have a good first-year experience. That is really, you know, or I moved too far away. I didn't like the town. I didn't like the environment. That is more often what we see being an issue with why students like or dislike school versus the academic environment. Okay, so it's an important consideration. Most students in the four-year college world, because it is competitive, will need to have more than just 2 or 3 schools or even just one school that they're applying to. In the world of two-year college or trade schools, often many of those processes are not competitive admissions process. For example, the junior college system in California, anybody can enroll in a junior college. Some programs may have some specific requirements, but the vast majority of programs will be open enrollment. So you're not going to get denied to a junior college. The big thing is about kind of knowing how much it's going to cost, making sure that you're prepared, because most people don't recognize that in the world of junior college, you actually pick classes prior to the end of your senior year. So there's a lot of pre-thinking that has to happen. But in the world of competitive admissions in the four-year college world, you need to have multiple options because they can tell you no. And so we want to make sure that you are diversifying your options. And so anywhere between 5 and 10 is kind of the recognized standard for most college admissions folks. Anything less than 5, and sometimes you're hedging your bets. Like you might not have enough options available to you, either financially or admissions wise. Over 10, and it starts to become a little excessive in that you might, you know, be spending too much money or time and or energy or effort to complete those applications. So you want to have a good diverse list, and you want a couple schools, and this is primarily kind of a list of admissibility based on your academic profile compared to the average profile of these schools, which is easily found on different websites like Naviance, which we have a tutorial series on YouTube that you can actually watch that breaks down some of the different tools. I actually just recorded a college section 1 earlier today so that you can actually watch. So you want to kind of see, okay, well, 1 to 2 safe schools. Safe schools are not like you would just walk through the door, but safe schools mean that your GPA, test scores, academic profile, the rigor of your courses tends to meet or exceed the average kind of 50th percentile at that school. You want a couple good fit schools as well. That's going to be right, kind of like schools right in your wheelhouse. Not necessarily schools that you're going to walk through the door of, but schools that, hey, you know what? If I have 3 and I get into 2 out of 3, that's a good showing. Okay, schools that are right in your house. Okay, another way to look at it is also based on their admissions percentages. That's a good indicator of how many students they're accepting. You have schools that, for example, accept, say, 75% of students. That school is going to probably be safer for many students because, unless you're kind of in the bottom quartile of that kind of admissions profile, you probably are pretty admissible to that school and have a pretty good chance. On the contrary, if you're applying to a school with a 10% admissions rate, that means 9 out of 10 students do not get in. And so you're playing this statistics game against you, and it's a challenge. So you don't want to ignore the admissions rate either just because you have a 4.0 plus GPA or a decent SAT score. More often than not, those students that are in that 10% world also have great SAT scores and great GPAs. And it's often the non-cognitive or extracurricular activities that you're doing that sometimes can basically make the difference and break that so-called tie. Once you reach schools, that's going to be schools that, hey, I have a dream of going to Harvard. No one wants to crush your dream. Go for it. Put yourself out there, see what happens. It might be a great fit for you. More likely than not, it's going to be an answer of no. But if you have a dream to apply to Stanford, make it happen. Okay, do your best, and who knows, it could happen. Like I said, there are surprises in this process every year. Okay, keeping information updated and starting to complete a senior profile. That senior profile is something that this summer students should think about doing as well. Okay, that senior profile is something that schools will require for. Teachers and staff here at North Tahoe High School will require for completing student letters of recommendation. That is a process that many private and out-of-state schools, for example, many of the schools, if not all of the schools on the Common Application, will require at least one recommendation from a counselor and potentially a teacher. Okay, so many of them require 2 to 3 teachers and a counselor recommendation along with transcripts and a rating scale. So that is something that think of it like an extended resume. We would love to see your resume. I know many juniors do that in junior pathways. We'd love to see a copy of your resume, but it asks very specific questions that help us give a better representation of you on this letter of recommendation. So that's a wonderful summer opportunity. It's available on that counseling website, so you can actually download it and type on it and have it ready to go right when you return to school. So that's a wonderful way to spend an hour or two this summer and check off another thing that can be done prior to the start of school time. All right. There are a few resources here. I will include the link to this presentation in the description of the video if it's not there already. So I'm not going to describe each of these. There are a few great tools that are out there. Books, as like published books with paper and pen that sometimes people like, or digital books. Okay. These are a few tips that students should be start thinking about now as they are ready to roll into senior year. For example, along with those recommendations, who might I be ready to ask? What is a teacher that could be someone who would like or be a good representative for me? A couple things to note that we've told students is that if you think you have a great recommender, there's a good likelihood that many other students do as well. Okay, we have a couple very popular people that students like to ask. It's most typically teachers that students have had in their last 2 to 3 years of school. And we do have a couple people that get many asks. So if you have someone in particular, it's never a bad thing to kind of ask them ahead of time. And we will review this with students at the beginning of the year. There is a process for asking. Again, it's never a requirement. So please don't hand the paper to a teacher and say, please write my letter of recommendation. At least you said please, but you should be asking, would you be willing to? Teachers do not have to. I actually do not have to write a letter. I love to write them because I think it provides so much important details for the college admissions process, but it's definitely not a requirement, and we can say no. And we do. If you have a teacher or a staff member say no, oftentimes it might be they maybe didn't have as great relationship as you might have thought. More often in my case, I often maybe don't know enough to write a strong letter of recommendation about you. If all I've ever met with you about is, you're changing your schedule, then that doesn't make for a very great recommendation letter. So often not writing a recommendation letter is better than writing one that is mediocre at best. Okay. A little bit about 2-year college info as well. So that process, like I said, does start a little bit later in the year. The application or enrollment process typically opens, and it's dependent on the school itself, usually between December and March of the year prior to your attendance. So while 4-year colleges is a little bit earlier in the fall, typically for applications, the junior college is a little bit later, a little bit after Thanksgiving is when we see most schools start to open up. Some schools won't even be until March or April when they open up their fall application cycle. But you guys need to start planning. A major difference with this process is that students do not need to apply to 5 to 10 different schools. Do your research, but you really only need to pick one. And that's the main difference between an enrollment and an application. Okay, the application, they can tell you no. The enrollment process, they won't. So you don't need to do 2 or 3. Pick the one that you want to go to and enroll there. The financial aid timeline and financial aid still do apply. So you still can receive financial aid at junior college, but there is timelines that still go with that process. And so that October 1st is still the same starting date for junior college, 4-year college, and trade schools. Ask questions. The number one thing that causes students to struggle in junior college is the planning process. If you do not have a plan, often that means that you will not be addressing that education as best you can. You might not be taking the right classes to help you meet your goal. You might not plan ahead and not be able to take a certain class that is a prerequisite for the class you might need to take the next semester to complete that kind of 2-year transfer plan. Okay. Along with transfers, getting a 4-year degree does not always have to start at a 4-year college right away. you can start at a junior college and work your way through some of the general education requirements and actually apply as a transfer student to pretty much any university you'd like to go to. There are very few universities that will not take transfer students. One of the benefits of this is if you are in a couple different boats, whether that's financially, if finances are going to be difficult with college, or academically or test score wise, sometimes like, hey, you know what, 9th and 10th grade year, you might have not had the most stellar year. You started putting things together in junior and senior year, and now you're like, hey, I really want to go to college. Sometimes that 9th to 10th grade year can really mess up some of the plans that you might have had a little later in high school. This 2-year college is a great process because you are now no longer, after completing this 2-year process, being judged by these 4-year colleges based on your high school transcripts. You're now being admitted based on these college transcripts that you'll be bringing from these 2 years of college at a junior college. So it's almost like a fresh start. So we've had a number of students, even from our school in the last 5 or 6 years, who have started at a 2-year college, getting into great schools. Any school, from Cal Poly, San Diego State, UCLA, UC Berkeley, all from junior colleges. And so it's a great, great step. And then please keep track of deadlines. They do have deadlines and they have registration windows, just like every other process. So please, please, please pay attention and have a plan. Some things about an application, which I will hit on a few key pieces here. We will dive a little bit deeper about the applications in the fall, since most applications are not ready to be started yet. But the biggest and foremost one is really start being a stickler for checking your work. Accuracy is important. Colleges will notice and they will be paying attention. So please be extra careful to not make mistakes. One thing you can start doing now is start researching some of those deadlines. When are things due? When are things open? When can I actually schedule some of these things into a calendar that you should be keeping so that I don't miss something or have to rush in this process? Okay. The other piece is really keeping an academic focus throughout the year. Yes, you will be busy. Yes, you'll have a lot of things to do, but you also have to succeed academically. Your senior year is not a write-off. Colleges pay very close attention to senior year. And most frequently, we see this in the spring semester. There's actually a word for it called senioritis. Okay, and this is when seniors often have started getting application results back, maybe getting into a few colleges, and they say, whew, all right, I'm in. Now I don't have to do anything else. And that can't be further from the truth. Senior year is the biggest reason why students have rescinded admissions, because they may be AB students and then they kind of see the admissions and they hit cruise control in that spring timeframe and get some C's and D's. Schools don't take kindly to that, and they can pull your admissions back. There are a few common types of applications, and these are things that you might want to start researching this summer. In particular, the common application might be one that you want to look up. You can actually create a common application account, and they will roll over typically right around August 1st. So there probably was a day or two of downtime in this fall timeframe, but they will roll your account over for you. And there'll be an option to roll that account into the next application cycle. So you can actually create it, start looking around, fill out some of the basics, demographics, that kind of stuff. Don't add a ton of stuff about colleges quite yet, or recommendations and that kind of thing, but you can see things like the writing prompts and stuff like that. The next one is going to be school-specific applications. That's going to be like the UC system application, the CSU Apply application, which is the California State University system that applies to all the 23 different schools, or the single school, say Montana State or UNR, will have their own application system. Okay, those are the primary applications you'll see out there. We're going to save this slide for the fall timeframe, I think. The one thing I will point out is if you are considering, sometimes people have a misguided idea of what early decision and early action are. If you are thinking about doing early decision, please do your research. We'll dive into what that means in the fall at an upcoming meeting, but you should hop online, check out what it actually means to do early decision. It is a binding agreement, and it has a lot of ethical and legal implications with it. So be extra careful. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'm happy to answer them, but please don't do early decision lightly. It is a big deal. So what is my role as a school counselor? So similar to prior years, my role is to guide, to light a path, to answer questions, and support students and parents as we go through this senior year. One thing that sometimes happens is sometimes I start to notice parents, probably in every well-meaning way, start doing things for students. More, taking on some of the responsibility that the students need to do. And again, it's all in the sense of being loving, being caring, wanting the best for your child. In the sense of, my kid's busy, they got a lot of stuff going on, so I'm going to take care of some of these things. My 110% advice is please, please, please do not do this. Okay. It really does cause an impact for your student, and it takes away some of the opportunity for students to learn how to manage themselves, which will catch up to them next year because they think that they can manage all this responsibility. And if they haven't got the full sense of it yet, they will overburden themselves in college. And so as much as it might be difficult for you as a parent to kind of take a step back, with all the good intentions, please do let your student be the one in charge, and make sure that they are the ones communicating with colleges, communicating with me, taking their steps that they need to do. They are 17, often almost 18 in their senior year. They should be taking on a level of responsibility, even though sometimes it can be hard because they're stressed out and have a lot of things going on. So please know that I've seen it happen. I know kind of what sometimes the outcome can be, and the outcome is so much better if they are if they are in charge of that process and taking care of almost everything, versus having, some of the responsibilities shouldered by a parent or guardian. On that note, I do communicate primarily during the senior year with the student. For example, we'll have a post-secondary planning meeting in the early fall of senior year. That's something that I invite students to set up. I do not invite parents to set up. I ask the student, and I highly encourage them to make sure that their parent is invited and hopefully attends. You are a major partner of parents. But if a student says, I'm going to have this meeting and I'm not going to have my parent there, or they can't come and I want to do it anyways, that is not a problem in my book. That's their choice as a student. I'm happy to meet with parents individually, but I always will defer to the student. Students, you are an awesome advocate for yourself most of the time. And so sometimes I might pull you aside, even before a parent meeting, and I might ask you, what do you really want? Because I know from my experience that sometimes parents and students don't always want the same thing. And my job as advocate is to promote the student success. Okay. As much as I want to try to make everybody happy, the students are the ones that are going to college. So students, if I ask you, what do you really want? I really want to know, because then I'm going to try to advocate for you, even with a parent that maybe that doesn't agree or has a different idea what needs to happen. I want to make sure that the student's idea is discussed and considered, if it's something different from what a parent might think as the likely next step in the process. So we'll skip this page. We'll cover this in the fall, what Naviance student is going to be involved in. It is a great tool. And again, I have a tutorial series up on YouTube. There's a playlist that you can access, but it is a great tool for this summer. There's a couple different things that I'll highlight for you there. Just briefly, is number one is there's a college research process. So that's a great tool if you're trying to expand that college list. There's also a list of common scholarships that are local. So you can find a scholarship list. It's not something that you will likely be applying for right now. We're jumping into financial aid for a little bit, and that's going to be something that will happen in the late fall, early spring timeframe. So the ones that you'll see on Naviance are typically expired at this point in the year for seniors. You can also do some test prep. So there is a Naviance test prep available, and that's with the ACT. The SAT support for test prep, which is also a great activity for the summer, is on Khan Academy. So that's a free tool that you can use in that. One of those two things is a wonderful way to spend a couple of hours this summer. So you can come back and take another SAT if you'd like, if you're not super happy with your score. And even if you are, spending a little bit of time prepping this summer usually can improve it even better. And so that's a great summer activity. Financial aid is another piece that sometimes more typically parents are freaked out about, but students can be as well because they know the impact on their family potentially. But college is expensive. You know, it's something that is hotly debated in today's society about the cost of college and the rising cost of college. But it's also pretty undeniable that the investment with college at any level has dividends. Now, you do have to be smart, okay, and that's where the difference is. You will pay for college, but you should. There are some rough suggestions about things to be careful of. Okay, so being realistic is one of those things. So understanding kind of what the family situation is. And parents, this is where you and your student probably this summer go out for dinner, sit down, and talk about money. Okay, parents, your students probably do not understand a whole lot about family finances, about what's going on with your bank account. Do you have any money set aside for college? Have a conversation with them before they get into their application process so that they understand, like, hey, if I apply to 6 private schools, I sure better get a lot of merit aid because we're not getting a whole lot of, need-based aid, and it's going to be a full pay situation. Okay, that might not be the best approach. Okay, so you do want to have those conversations early on, and this summer is a wonderful time to do that. There are ways to get estimates about college. So Naviance will, like I said, there's some tutorials. Hop on there; it'll give you some information about kind of an average net cost at different schools. I would say they're a rough estimate, definitely, but it gives you kind of a ballpark figure to kind of start working with. The FAFSA forecaster, that FAFSA is a free application for federal student aid. They have a website that actually takes information from your taxes, and you can get a rough idea of, hey, here's my EFC, or expected family contribution. So that's an amount that the government says your family should be contributing to your education. And that's kind of the bare bones, like, hey, this is the starting place of how much school might cost. And then work to proactively seek out college and outside scholarships in your senior year. Sometimes students don't apply for it. I do senior checkouts every year, and I'm kind of surprised how many students tell me, oh, I just didn't apply to the FAFSA. And I ask them why, and they say, well, I didn't think I needed it. I didn't think we'd qualify. If you make $1 billion a year, you should still apply for the FAFSA, because by applying, you are not committing to anything. If you get only loans, you can deny them all if you don't want. But you're also giving up the opportunity for schools to provide merit-based aid in many circumstances, as well as other supportive programs that might not be need-based. Okay, so it is my strong opinion that every family do the FAFSA, no matter your income level. It is just another way to reduce the barriers to have school be accessible, affordable, and really just easy. It helps to grease some of the wheels. We talked about asking questions. Big red underline. Okay, so observe deadlines. We try to push this here. And another thing we hear from seniors is, oh, we wish deadlines were more strict here at North Tahoe High School. And that's great as a senior leaving. But usually parents and students are not super keen on deadlines sometimes if it impacts them. So we do realize that, and we try to be flexible. However, schools are not flexible. Okay, so when we're talking about college application deadlines, if it says 11:59 p.m. Eastern time on this date, it's 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. If it's 11:59, or I guess 12:01, you're too late. Okay, so please do make sure you're observing deadlines and write them down. Okay, we are also looking at more than 1 year regarding financial aid. So when you're getting a financial aid package, that's for 1 year. They do it year at a time, and it can fluctuate year to year. So your income fluctuates, which determines your financial aid eligibility. So your income and your financial aid packages could be different. All right. So it's important to know that when you're budgeting, when you're looking at how much schools cost, they typically do not give you here's a 4-year cost. They give you, here's your first year cost. And then you have to multiply it by 2 by making pretty good kind of estimates. We talked about being the tortoise. The hare kind of runs, kind of works in sprints and stops. That's usually what we see in senior life is, I'm going to work hard, and then I'm going to get all caught up, and then I'm going to take a break for 2 weeks. And I'm going to work hard, and then take a break after I submit something. Okay, so that is not a very maintainable process. Please do take the time to be consistent, set up a plan of action, especially through the fall. The fall is the busiest time, but to continue through the springtime and really just make sure that you are a consistent student, a consistent applicant, and that you can do the best to spread things out. Rushing and stopping usually produces sloppy work, whether that's writing an essay, completing courses on an application, or doing your math test. So please take the time and slow down. It might mean cutting things out that maybe don't all need to be involved in your life. It might be like paring down some things that are extras so that you can really focus on the important things. Talked about deadlines. Okay. These are our student responsibility. Okay. We try our best to remind students. We try our best to meet as many deadlines as we can, but they are the responsibility of a student. It's not a parent and it's not an educator's job to make sure that your child meets any deadlines. Okay, but we will definitely do our best to support them as best we can. Okay, so we're coaching. We're not doing. We're not going to hit that submit button for them, even if we know that they are there. Okay. We're going to skip this nuts and bolts thing. I will mention one thing about NCAA. NCAA is the National Collegiate Athletics Association, and they do have some requirements for student athletes. The student athletes will be creating, many of them have, but we are required to send in 2 transcripts and test scores for the NCAA eligibility. Typically, we're looking primarily at Division I and Division II sports within that NCAA world. So we're not talking all students. We're talking usually a small subset of students that are considering collegiate athletics, but it is something that is a process separate from any of these other steps. And so they will need to go onto the NCAA Eligibility Center, create an account. And if they create an account later this summer, they'll need to ask me to please send a high school transcript showing the end of their up through the end of your junior year grades. They'll need to order test scores to the NCAA Eligibility Center as soon as they're done. And then we will, at the end, after graduation, we will upload a final transcript to NCAA to ensure that they're meeting all of their course requirements and eligibility requirements to play sports. An important note about that is if your student has taken independent study coursework outside of Coldstream, they'll need to also order transcripts from those institutions. That might be BYU, Apex, Sierra College. Those schools will all need, NCAA typically needs those schools' transcripts directly. Coldstream classes tend to, they are already on our transcript, and I've never had an issue with them needing a separate transcript from them. But many of the other, especially online schools, they will want transcripts. So just have that in mind. And that is an important process, so don't wait too long into the senior year for that. We mentioned a couple of these items already for summer ideas, summer work. Traveling is important. A lot of times people take summer as an opportunity to travel. I will be doing that myself, not to visit schools, but to relax. But as a parent or a senior or a parent of a senior, it is highly recommended that if you are traveling, try to take a little bit of time and maybe stop at a school that's nearby, even if it's not on the student's list. A visit to a school may create new options. It may solidify their beliefs or thoughts about schools, or like say, nope, that's definitely not a school for me. But that informs your process. What about that school? Why was that school not good for you? That informs, okay, what might be a good school for you? And so every trip, no matter if they're on your list or not, is worthwhile. Volunteering this summer is a great opportunity. That includes things like working. But the big thing about your activities this summer is thinking about why and how you are different because of it. Okay, that it is a meaningful opportunity to work and volunteer, but you do have to consider not just what you did, but qualify it. Why did you do that? How did you change because of your experience? That is really what schools want to know. They do not want a list of your resume items. They want to know how you've changed or how you have changed something else because of your involvement. That goes into kind of the essay component. So some of these schools require writing, and that is another wonderful summer opportunity. Many of the essay prompts, for example, the UC personal insight questions, are already published. There should not be any changes from last year's prompts to the UC personal insight questions. So if you Google UC personal insight questions, you should find very easily the list of the 8 options that you'll then choose 6 to respond to. Write several of those. Take some time this summer to do some introspective and reflective thinking about why schools should admit you. this is one of those non-cognitive factors that I mentioned earlier that really can make a huge difference in applications. And often why sometimes I get questions of, well, why did this I have a better GPA than this other student? Why did they get in and I didn't? I tell them often it's a gray area to start. And oftentimes the academics are just one component and there's a non-cognitive factor that we might not know about, or they just got a better reader. They had a stronger essay, or something else that really just caught the admissions committee's eye. The essays are one area that brings, one of the only areas I would say that often brings that personal insight and personal touch to the application. Everything else is a lot of data points. They don't get a lot of personality into those applications unless you have an interview or an audition or something like that. Okay. We talked about the senior profile. Please start that. This has some information about the NCAA. So if you have a chance, download that presentation. Here's some information. It looks a little different, but you should see a option called Naviance Test Prep within within your Naviance account. The page looks a little bit different as they recently, in the last couple of weeks, updated Naviance. There is a free resource, and this is one that not many students tend to take advantage of, but it really does help. This is a program called by an organization called Better Make Room, and what it does, it's a free texting platform. And actual real people, I actually have colleagues, school counselor colleagues that are awesome, that are part of this organization as volunteers, that they will actually respond to questions about college. So they send little prompts and reminders. Hey, did you know the FAFSA is open today? Hey, there's pretty common application deadlines coming up. Did you do your last SAT? It's the registration window is closing on Friday. They send little reminders to students throughout the year. And then students can say, hey, what do you mean by FAFSA? And they can actually respond. A real person will actually respond to you. So it's another tool, another touch point that students can get the support they might need through this senior year. So all they have to do is text college to that number on the screen, and they'll be signed up. They can opt out at any time. But the other nice thing is it actually continues through the summer, after senior year, and into college. So it transitions from a high school support to a first-year freshman college support program. So I highly encourage, please use that. Down here, you can see a link. This is under the college and career counseling button on that North Tahoe High School website. There's a link to a college app spreadsheet template. That's another tool for researching and kind of keeping track of these data points. This is only open to students. So the student has to be logged in with their TTUSD account. I do this because I want the student to create it. Students, if you are downloading this, feel free to share with your parents. But I want students, again, to be the ones making this list, to be creating things, to be driving this ship. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up for our presentation today. Once again, we'll be having an August 24th Reach Higher Academy program that our signups are coming to a close very, very shortly. I'll probably extend it to about Tuesday next week, which is the Tuesday following the end of the school year. But we will be having a number of parent events later on this year in the fall, where we go a little bit deeper into some of these different subjects and break them down. In particular, like the college application process will be one, as well as a specific financial aid application night, as well as a 2-year college specific night where we will invite representatives from Sierra College up in Truckee, as well as Lake Tahoe Community College in South Lake, to come and share a little bit about the process and really provide the expert guidance on that program and the things to watch out for and how to be successful. So keep an eye out for that. I hope that you guys got something from this presentation. And we will see you in the fall. Have a wonderful summer, and thanks for participating today.